So I'm a really big fan of the game chess. I'm not good at it, but I enjoy playing it, and there's no shame in liking something if you're not good at it. Now in chess there are two colors, right? Black and white. Which goes first? White, right? White has a greater chance of winning from the first move. Holding all other factors the same, white wins 56% of the time and black wins 44%. So if given the choice between the light and the dark in chess, with everything else being equal, you should pick the light. Anybody here seen Star Wars? A few people, okay. There's the light side of the Force and the dark side of the Force, right? Which is the better side, the more noble side? If you haven't seen Star Wars, you could probably still tell me. The light side is the good side. The darkest hour is just before the dawn, a dark night of the soul, a black comedy, unlucky black cats, the dark web, dark humor, deep dark secret. It was a dark and stormy night, the black market. I could go on and on with cultural ideas about how we talk about darkness. And of course, woven into the fabric of our society is our history of helping to create the only system of slavery that was entirely race-based, where the light-skinned people enslaved the dark-skinned people from the dark continent of Africa, using race or darkness of skin as a justification for being less than human. We are surrounded by ideas of darkness not just as a state or a color, but as something bad. Some of the words I associate with darkness and blackness are sinister and sad and scary, depressing, wickedness or evil, something to be avoided. Even the metaphors that we use when lighting our chalice can sometimes fall under this. Even our reading today talked about how we can see that light. These ideas are a huge part of our cultural narrative. And when I think about the solstice, the longest night of the year that's coming up soon, I think about the fact that often on the 21st of December, we think about the light coming back, or how it starts to. And that's how we hold on as we push through the darkness of winter, instead of holding on to the goodness of the darkness. Now, don't get me wrong, I hate winter. It's a weird thing to say for a Canadian, perhaps, but winter is cold. It's uncomfortable. It puts people at risk, especially those who are unhoused. I hate that it feels like midnight the moment I bring my kids home from school. It makes me long and yearn for the light, the long days, the warmth. Even those words, right, cold and warm, have negative and positive connotations of good and bad. And so, in my time as your minister, I have done several services on the theme of darkness, celebrating the dark, honoring the dark. One year I had everyone take a little tea light and we scattered them around the sanctuary and turned the lights off. It was like a beautiful night sky. And I said, only in the darkness can you see the light, which I thought was a beautiful sentiment. But in worship committee that month, somebody called me out and told me that I wasn't actually celebrating darkness when I said that. Rather, the light as a contrast to the darkness. That's what a lot of our holidays at this time of year do, right? Hanukkah is a festival of lights. Christmas is full of bright lights and candles and Advent wreaths. Yule lights a log and welcomes the returning of the light. And even Kwanzaa, a holiday that celebrates Pan-African identity, involves the lighting of candles. And that's not bad. There's something magical about that. There's nothing wrong in seeing the beauty of light and dark together. But sometimes, I think we get so excited by the light that we don't let ourselves sit in the darkness. We won't let ourselves bask in it. Let it slow us down. Let it embrace and envelop us. Darkness provokes fear. Are you afraid of the dark, right? What yearnings in our soul might we experience if our sense of sight is taken away? How vulnerable we become. Yet how might we recognize some truths about ourselves? What truths about ourselves and others might we experience in the dark? Many years ago, I went to one of those completely in the dark restaurants. Has anybody here been to one of those? Nobody? Just me? Okay. I was visiting Montreal with my girlfriend at the time, and we walked by it, and I just got so excited because I love a gimmick, especially when it comes to eating meals out. So I pleaded with my girlfriend to go with me. She reluctantly agreed. We walked in and we put our phones in a locker and we were giving a menu where she thoughtfully picked out a meal and I went with the surprise me option. Our waiter had us hold his shoulder as he guided us to our table. It was a lot more unsettling than I'd imagined. And this being over 10 years ago, I only have a few faint memories of that night. I remember trying to hold my girlfriend's hand across the table and spilling her red wine all over her. I remember knowing that she shouldn't have ordered red wine. I remember knowing that I was eating a vegetable, but not being able to tell which one. I remember the noise of the other tables overwhelming me. I remember having to go to the bathroom and calling out, Jean, Jean, as I'd been instructed to call the waiter, but having no way of knowing if he heard my request. So just feeling really rude as I just yelled it until he arrived. I remember feeling afraid and frustrated that I had no way to leave if I wanted to, feeling stuck in my seat. But the feeling that really sticks in my mind, my girlfriend was pretty much annoyed at me the entire night. Maybe I shouldn't have badgered her to do something she didn't want to do. Maybe it's because I spilled red wine all over her. Or maybe it's because some truths are better understood in the dark. It wasn't long after this that she and I broke up. I sometimes wonder if the truth of the darkness was the beginning of the end. That in the darkness we were both able to recognize something we'd been distracting ourselves from. The hard truths that we weren't right for each other and that our paths were going in different directions. Because as much as we are afraid of the things we think darkness brings out, the monsters, the zombies, or whatever, it's the vulnerability, the truths inside ourselves and our loved ones that are perhaps the most scary, but also have the potential to be the most beautiful. Who hasn't confessed a love for someone in the middle of a dark room? Who hasn't shared a secret at a sleepover or huddled close on a walk on a cold winter's night? Who hasn't realized that vulnerability that they hold and face the truth about who they are in the night? Perhaps a dark night of the soul is simply a moment when it's dark enough to see what the soul really wants. Maybe that's why there are so many Christmas movies about people falling in love. Social science researcher Brené Brown will tell you that emotional vulnerability is how we make connections with each other. And sometimes that vulnerability is easier when you can't completely see the other person's reaction. We can share the moments of pain, of difficulty, of love, of reality more easily. This is a gift of the night. And if it was as light as it was in summer, many of us would never get that gift. Like my children who in the summer fall asleep when it's light out and wake up when it's light out. Now they get to get hours and hours of darkness with which to marvel and gaze upon, to see its beauty, to feel how it draws that vulnerability out. Because even if we weren't taught to be vulnerable as children, and I certainly wasn't, we can teach our children that the desire to be vulnerable is truly a strength. Last week we talked about rest, something that is easier for us to do in the dark. And as I look at our world, I think about the bright bombs over Gaza with their noise and glare across the sky. I think about all those people in that region and how they long for the dark of night, where they can rest peacefully. I think about those sleeping on the streets in our community, in alcoves of businesses with the bright lights over them, how they must long for the safety that darkness brings. Because as much as we sometimes think that darkness only brings what is scary, in both of these instances, darkness can bring a feeling of safety and security. There is nothing that feels safer to me than being tucked in my bed with the lights off, children asleep, knowing that I can drift off until another day, and all people should be able to experience that. So as these nights become longer, I implore you to relish the gifts that darkness brings. Bask in its warmth and allow it for you to be vulnerable. May it be so, and let us say together, Amen.